Okay. All right. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Grace Rains. I'm the Director of Operations with The Conductor. And for those of you that aren't familiar, The Conductor is a public-private partnership between the University of Central Arkansas and Startup Junkie Consulting. We provide resources, events, and programming like what you're going to see today to inspire and empower entrepreneurs, innovators, and makers. And we do that here in Central Arkansas, along with our partners up in Northwest Arkansas at Startup Junkie. But everything that we do, all the resources we provide for entrepreneurs, innovators, and makers is completely free. And so I'm joined today by Patti Stobaugh from PattiCakes and Stoby's. Thank you so much, Patti, for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. This will be fun.
Yes, I know it's an incredibly busy time for y'all, so I appreciate you taking the time. So a little bit of an intro. So Patti and her husband, David, are the co-owners of PattiCakes Bakery and Stoby's restaurant. Patti is in her encore career. She was originally a CFO and then moved out of that into the world of entrepreneurship. Patti and David are very generous in the communities that they serve. They're huge supporters of Bethlehem House. Patti is the past president of Bethlehem House. She also is the current president of the Conway Chamber Board. And additionally, she's on the committee to help develop Midtown Conway and on the Downtown Partnership Board. And she also serves on the board of on the board of directors for the Retail Bakers of America. And as of today, I saw has been named president for the next 2 years. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But most importantly, she is the Grammy to her beautiful grandkids and a dog mom and avid dog foster mom. So, yeah. All right, so let's get started. We'll just dive in. So for those of you that are watching us today, you can post questions in the comments. And we'll get those answered at the very end. So any questions that you have for Patti, if you want to just know more about her or you have advice or questions, just post those below and we'll get them answered at the end. So Patti, let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, let's start from the very beginning, though. Grace used to work at PattiCakes, so we know each other very well.
I did. Patti gave me my very first job, my very first real job.
That?
Yes, yeah. My very first real job. So I did a lot of growing up in high school and in college in that bakery. So Patti knows the very beginning.
I do. And my husband used to always say, Grace for president. He's just convinced it'll happen someday. So, okay, where did I grow up? I was born in Billings, Montana, and my family moved from there. That's where my father's family was from. And then we moved when I was 6 weeks old, so I don't remember Montana at all. We moved to San Antonio, and that's primarily where I grew up. I lived for a while in Tucson, Arizona as a kid, back to San Antonio, and came to college in Arkansas and stayed.
So what was it like growing up kind of in all of those places?
I grew up primarily hanging out with my grandmother, and she is the one that taught me how to bake and cook. And she was born in 1898. So if you think about the things that she saw, she was such a practical woman. And to this day, she is why I make my bed every morning. Because seriously, I mean, I will get out of bed. It's like, I've got to make my bed. My grandma would be mad. She passed when I was 12. So, you know, it just left a lasting impression. I've got to make my bed every day. But it really does make you get up and feel like a little bit better having your bed made, or at least it does me. Growing up, I'm 62, and I grew up in a time where it was a heck of a lot more fun. You didn't have to be watched as much. We would, you know, Saturdays we'd get out on our bicycle, pack a lunch, and just be home by dark. And can you imagine letting your kids do that now? I mean, it was, so I feel like my childhood was pretty idyllic, really, growing up like that. I have always lived somewhere where it was warmer, which is really funny because I prefer cold weather. I love to go visit my family in Montana, and if I ever lived any place else in the United States, it would be Montana. And I'm sorry for the phone ringing in the background. But what do I do? It's ringing.
Do you need to answer it?
No, I'm not going to answer it. But anyhow, sorry guys for the noise in the background. So it was good. I had a good childhood.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you ended up coming to Arkansas and going to Lyon College, so formerly Arkansas College.
I started off at Fayetteville. And
Okay.
that's what brought me because it's cheaper to go, at least at that time, I have no idea now, cheaper to go to the U of A than it was to go to UT, even without a state tuition. So I started at U of A. I loved it, but I'm such an introvert that being in a sorority and living in a sorority house to me was, I loved the girls, still in contact with so many of my sorority sisters, but I never had a moment alone. And it was really hard for me. So I just moved to a smaller school. It made more sense for me. At that time, if you were in a sorority, you could not move out of the sorority house without giving up your pen. And I didn't want to give up my pen. So you can, it's pretty, you can tell that group of girls was very important to me. But I was pretty miserable. It was like a constant, it felt like a cocktail party, not with all the drinking because we weren't allowed to drink in the sorority house, but it was just, there was always, it was never boring.
Yeah.
No dead air space ever.
As an introvert, I'm sure you just loved that.
Oh yeah, loved it.
So how was it moving, kind of to the South after being, in Montana and, all of New Mexico, all over the place? How was it moving to Arkansas? Was there a difference there that you saw, and especially at that age?
So what made me love Arkansas from the moment we drove into the state was how green it was. Because Texas is not very green, Arizona is not very green. The desert of Texas has its own beauty, for sure. Fantastic sunsets, the mountains. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's just not the same beautiful that Arkansas is. It just does not. And I love the 4 seasons that we have here. My favorite is spring and fall. I do not like summer at all, and I do love winter, but I just love spring and I love fall. So do you remember in The Wizard of Oz how when they went from the black and white and then to the color scene, how dramatic that was? That's what it felt like the first time I ever came to Arkansas. Good experience.
Yeah. So at that time, you're in college. So did you ever think of yourself as being an entrepreneur or consider that as a career path?
No, definitely not. I mean, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. My mom was not a lot of help as far as, hey, this is what you need to do, or you need to look at this path or whatever. And so it was, when I went to college, it was a very eye-opening experience of all these people seem to have their stuff together, only to find out they really didn't. They just acted like it because they came from a background where education was super important, and it was not so much preached in my home. So when I came to college, I had a lot to learn. But once I got out of school, I know by nature I'm a workaholic. I knew that early on, and it's hard to work that hard for somebody else continually. And so I knew eventually I wanted to do my own thing.
So what led you to accounting from that? How did you get there?
You probably know this story, Grace, because you know how much.
Everybody else to know the story.
Yes, yeah. So I wanted to be a physical therapist, and I was a junior at Fayetteville. I was in there. It was my second year there, but I was a junior, and my anatomy professor came to find me in lab one Friday afternoon, and he comes, he looks around, he sees me, does this, and there were 300 people in our anatomy lab. So I didn't even know he knew who I was. And that was before the days of having students' pictures, on a computer screen. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound so ancient, but it was just a different time than it is now. And so I went out in the hall, and he said, "You have an A in my class." And I said, "I know, I worked really hard." And he said, "Well, there are very few A's in there." He said, "You have an F in lab." I said, "I know, I can't stand cutting up this cat." And he said, "Well, I looked at your, I don't remember what they called it, not a transcript. I don't even remember what they called it. But anyhow, he looked at my folder and saw that I wanted to be a physical therapist." And I said, well, yeah, but I mean, a physical therapist, they're not dealing with blood. And so he just kind of laughed. He said, do you not realize you get a cadaver your first semester? And so everything got really light, like it did whenever my kids got stitches. And then I had to have smelling salts because I would pass out when I saw blood. So everything got really light. I grabbed his arm and he said, listen, just go home. I'll give you a B. Don't come back to class, but change your major. So I was putting myself through school and I needed to get out and I didn't have a clue. My favorite subject was math, but I knew I was not cut out to be a teacher. I just knew that was not for me. Not so much the kids. I didn't think I would be the proper person to deal with the kids' parents. And so I decided to go into accounting. Well, math and accounting don't have anything to do with each other, but I was too stupid to know it. So I was thankful I got an accounting degree. It's not something I ever really enjoyed, but if you find yourself at a crossroads and don't know what you want to do, get an accounting degree because you can always get a job, always. So that's how I ended up with it.
So how did you go from accounting degree to CFO of Arkansas One Call?
So I was, I worked in Batesville for a while. That's where I stayed. I transferred to Lyon College. You had mentioned that, but I stayed there after graduation. And then unfortunately, some years later, ended up divorced and I moved to Little Rock. My oldest son was having some medical problems and I moved to the Maumelle area to be closer to UAMS. And so I went from working in an accounting firm in Batesville and then to, I mean, I'm kind of leaving a lot out, but worked for an accounting firm in Little Rock for a little while. And then one of our clients was Arkansas One Call. And Arkansas One Call is who started ARCUPs. And this is all underground safety, all of the gas lines, electrical lines, telephone lines, et cetera. So I was with Arkansas One Call. Well, I went to work for Arkansas One Call after I left that accounting firm. And then we started ARCUPs. And that was one of probably the most fun, challenging parts of my accounting career because we brought on 125 employees in 45 days. And it was equipping them with trucks and computers and cell phones. And by law, we were required to have one employee in every county. And so just the logistics, this was in 1999. But just the logistics of making all that work was very interesting. I mean, just even getting them all signed up for their health insurance. So we went from, Arkansas One Call went from a company of just 30 employees at Arkansas One Call, and then adding the 120 plus the administrative staff. I mean, it felt like overnight. You know, it was 45 days, but that's, in the business world, that's about overnight. And so I stayed there for 12 years. Met David in, if he's watching, I'm sorry, I don't remember, 1999 or early 2000. We married in 2001, and he was pretty entrenched in Conway. I was working in Conway, so I moved here. My boys finished out school at Conway High, both played football. And so here we are.
Here you are.
Here I am.
So, you know, at what point did you decide that you wanted to move kind of from that CFO Arkansas One Call world to kind of being an entrepreneur and opening your own bakery? You know, what was that thought process like?
So when my youngest son left for college, his grandparents, his dad's parents, had funded his education when he was born. And let me tell you, I had no idea what a gift that was. I mean, it was amazing. So when he hit college, when my youngest started college, I mean, you hate to use the words financial obligation, but my financial obligation to him was basically fulfilled. And so I was just tired of just the grind every day and how many hours I was working. and we had a management change. My boss was retiring. And so it was time for me to go. So I gave him a 6-month notice. It turned into a 1-year notice, which is a very long notice to give. But at any rate, that's what happened. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. I know, much to David's chagrin, I think he would have been really happy if I had just come on and started doing accounting, but I was so tired of it and I didn't love it. So I just took about a month off, and then I started working at Stoby's in Russellville a little bit. And then one day, probably about 6 months or so after I'd quit my job, across the parking lot from Stoby's in Russellville was a little cake shop. And on a Saturday, she put out a sign, liquidation sale, everything being sold Monday. And I had always wanted to do something food related, but when I graduated college in 1981, because it ended up taking me 5 years to get through with changing my major, women didn't go into the food business. It wasn't glamorous like it is now. And you have to remember, at that point in time, it was all about, if you were a female and wanting to hit the corporate world and break the glass ceiling and all of that, you needed to fast track your career. And so, I just gave up on ever wanting to do anything food related at that point. I used to cook for friends, and I was really big into hot air ballooning back then in college, and would cook for like 60 people, and it was just nothing. I mean, it was really just effortless. It was fun. But when this gal had the sign out, I thought, well, I've got a couple of really good cookie recipes, and so I'll just open a little bakery over here. And I really thought we would do nothing but bake the desserts for Stoby's, and then the pies and the cakes. I had no desire to do decorated cakes because I just didn't think that would be something that I would really I didn't know how to do it, number one. So I guess you're always afraid of what you don't know. So I bought that spot, and I had a gal helping me with the baking at Stoby's Russellville, and she came over with me. I left out kind of an important part. About 3 weeks after I quit my job, our baker at Stoby's Conway had some medical emergency. So I went over and started doing the baking, and Mrs. Smith, who was David's first employee when he opened Stoby's and really became like his surrogate mom. He lost his mom very young. But we spent a lot of Sunday afternoons with her hanging out at Stoby's while she was baking, just chatting. And I didn't know how invaluable those Sunday afternoons would be later on when I was needing to recreate her recipes, because like most things, when you get other people coming into following behind you in the restaurant, everybody wants to put their own spin on it. And Grace, I'm sure you remember that some when you worked at PattiCakes, how it would be, no, you do it this way, no, you do it that way. And then next thing you know, your recipe's been changed. So I had been doing the baking at Stoby's Conway. I went to Stoby's Russellville to get all of their recipes back in line like I had Conway from Mrs. Smith's originals. So I left that's kind of an important little step there. So when we opened PattiCakes Russellville, it was a dismal spot. I mean, it was really bad. And David, I think, was very reticent about me going into the food business because he knows how hard it is to the first few years, especially, to make it work. So he wasn't real excited about it, but now he's my biggest supporter. So I can't complain about that at all. But we joke about the first day that I opened in Russellville, he came in and put the keys down on the counter, and he said, well, I hope you can pay your rent. And he was just kidding, but in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, I am not ever going to have to ask him for rent. I hope, please don't ever let him have to supplement my rent. I mean, it will be so bad. So it's just kind of a running joke with us. But that's how we started. So it was me and then a lady named Phyllis Campbell. And then the gal that that was selling out, she came to work for me as well, and she did the decorated cakes. Well, my stepfather, who was so dear to me, passed just a few days after I opened the bakery. So here I had a brand new business. My husband didn't think I was going to be able to pay the rent, and I had to go to San Antonio and spend some time. It was really tough. So I was back and forth to San Antonio, getting everything closed up there, moving my mom to Conway with us. And Marilyn, who was my cake decorator, she and Phyllis, Marilyn didn't like us touching her stuff. Well, I get that now after learning to decorate cakes. You have your own stuff, and you don't want people messing with it. But I didn't understand that at the time. So, it's a really good example of you think you understand something or somebody, and you just don't know the whole story a lot of times. At any rate, so Marilyn quit, and Phyllis and I had a wedding cake due that weekend, and neither one of us had ever decorated a cake. And there were no YouTube videos. I mean, the internet was there, but it was, certainly not like it is today. So I found some videos online from some gal in California. They were DVDs. They were pitiful. I paid like $120 for these things, and they were pitiful. But it got us through, and we got the cake done. And I don't think the person ever knew that it was the first cake either of us had ever decorated. So then I realized, okay, if I'm going to own a bakery and we're going to have decorated cakes, I have to learn how to do it, because I don't want employees being able to do something I can't do, because then you're hamstrung. So that's how that happened.
That's interesting.
That was a long answer, wasn't it?
That was a long answer. And I do want to go back to, it's like a little bit ago when you said that the reason that, one of the reasons that you wanted to leave Arkansas On Call was just the number of hours that you worked, which I had to giggle a little bit from working for you, knowing how many hours you work now. I'm sure that at the time that was not the plan. But you were like, oh, okay, I'll leave and work less hours, and I'll go open, multiple bakeries and help my husband run his restaurants. And that'll get me to less hours per week. You probably work more now than you did.
Oh, yeah, about that. I do. But that's one thing about this whole COVID thing going on. I told you, Grace, before we started, that I've been self-quarantining for 2 weeks so that I could see my grandkids. And I realized I'm really kind of tired of working that much. I don't want to retire, have zero desire to retire, but I've enjoyed not setting an alarm in the morning and having a cup of coffee a little bit longer, visiting with David and working from home. I've set up a little office back in our utility room where I can just kind of get away from everybody and everything except my dogs, but that's a whole nother story. But anyhow, so yeah, it's been good. It was a lot more work than I ever thought it would be. And David was right. I mean, it was tough, but it was good. It's been good. I've loved it.
So you clearly, from your long answer and talking about, everything and your time with Miss Smith, you have a love for baking. Where did that come from?
From my grandmother, most definitely from my grandmother. Now, my mother was a really good cook too. My grandmother was just much more patient. And now that I'm a grandmother, I get that. It's like, people laugh and say, oh, it's because you can send them home at the end of the day. And that's not even it. I think it's just that if new moms knew what grandmothers knew, their life would be so much easier. Because you're just hard on yourself when you're a mom, especially a brand new mom. But my grandmother it didn't matter what she was doing in the kitchen. She would stop, I'd pull up a stool. Probably the earliest I remember is being 4 or 5, right in there, and baking with her and cooking with her. She's the one that taught me how to, and this came from living through the Depression, I'm sure, but if you just had no clue what you wanted to have for dinner, just open the refrigerator and start pulling stuff out, put it together. And you're going to have some that are misses, but most of the time they're hits. And David jokes that I can make a meal out of nothing. And I pretty much can, but it's because of her. And I remember when I was in 4th grade, I had a little tea party for my girlfriends, and I made little hors d'oeuvres and served them tea. And I remember telling them, this is what I'm going to do when I grow up. Well, like I had already mentioned, it was not the climate to do that when I got out of college. So I'm glad that I've been able to do both.
Yeah. So kind of in those early days, when David puts the keys down and, help you make your rent, who were your, did you have any mentors at that time, either in business or, in baking, or, who did you look to as you were kind of developing all of that and trying to make your rent?
I did not have a mentor at that time. And that's probably why it's been so important to me to, I'm involved with, and Grace, you may remember this, I don't know, but with a group of other bakery owners. They're all in Little Rock, and then me, there's 7 of us total. We meet monthly. Well, we haven't met this month because of COVID, but we, helping people there. I'm much older than all of them. And it's just, we have such a great sharing of ideas, but it's good to be able to help somebody like I wish I had had somebody to help me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, in those early days, then what was the most surprising thing to you about entering in the food industry? And that can be, when you first started working kind of with David in the restaurant, or, when you first started opening the bakery.
I would say just how hard it is. And it's like, I almost feel like I did my careers in reverse, because the food business is very physically demanding. The bakery business is particularly demanding. During this time of, I have one pastry chef that's having to self quarantine because he has a lung disease, and he cannot get this. I mean, he just cannot. And so I've been rolling out all the cinnamon rolls. Somebody else makes the dough, and then I come in the evenings and roll out cinnamon rolls. And I cannot believe how my arms have muscled up again in just a couple of weeks. I mean, it's just crazy. I'm going to look like Popeye pretty soon, I mean, it's just crazy, but it's also, I'm not 22 anymore. And it makes, I'm tired when I get home. I'm physically tired, but I like that too. So, it's kind of a catch-22. The short answer is, the restaurant business is hard. The bakery business, food service is hard. Margins are really low. You have to figure out how not to have waste, or very little waste. And there's a high turnover in the food business. Now, it will be interesting to see. The projections are, once we open the economy back up, that we'll be at about 20% unemployment. We've been at 3%, and literally, I can't tell you how hard it's been to find employees. Because when you hit 3% unemployment, about all you have, there's exceptions to the rule, but about all you have are people that really don't want to work.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see.
So we talked a little bit. So you opened your first bakery in Russellville. Clearly, you guys decided to open a bakery in Conway and focus more there. Tell me about kind of that thought process of moving to Conway and then eventually closing the Russellville location.
So we lived in Conway when I opened Russellville, and I was back and forth up there, and then had an apartment. I jokingly called it the estrogen loft, but I had an apartment over the bakery, and I would stay up there every other night. And I committed to do that for a year. At the end of the year, it was just really tough. I missed being away from home. I missed being away from David. He was very supportive of that. He knew that it was just going to be for a year, but I missed him. I missed seeing him. And so when we decided to open Conway, we already had the little house where PattiCakes is. That had belonged to Ruth and Coy Crow, that used to have Coy's where Stoby's is. And when Mr. Crow passed, and then Ruth still lived there, and then when she passed, we bought it from their family. And probably for 10 years, it was a rent house. So it made sense to put something there. I was expecting Conway to take the same amount of work as Russellville. I thought it would just be kind of a duplication of what we had done in Russellville. And within 6 months of opening Conway, we had exceeded where I thought had hoped we would be at like a year and a half. So I knew that I couldn't just stretch myself so thin to run both of them. I had worked for about a year with a young lady that was managing Russellville, and we just had different ideas on, I wanted the bakery to look like my grandma's house, and that's what they look like. And she wanted it to be more modern looking. And so while I wasn't there, she got rid of all my hominess, and it was very stark in there. And I thought, I don't know how we can get back to being on the same page. And I blame myself for not being up there more. When I first opened Conway took off like a rocket ship. And so after about 6 months, I sold it. By that time, we had purchased the building that bakery was in, and that had the bakery was there, and then it had like 4 apartments and then another little office space. And so we still own the building, and there's the person that I sold it to worked the business for a little while, and then she sold it to somebody else. So now it's still a bakery that's been there. We opened in 2006, so 14 years now there's been a bakery there. But yeah, it was just more a decision of, do I keep running back and forth? And no, the answer was no. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, that's incredible that y'all seen that kind of growth, and of course you've seen even more growth, and we'll talk about that. But first, I want to talk about what is probably your biggest entrepreneurial pivot, or what I would assume is your biggest entrepreneurial pivot to date, which would be the Stoby's fire. So tell me about. Okay, you get a call. Stoby's is on fire. Tell me about how was that feeling?
So that was at 6:30 on a Saturday morning, and it was wedding season. It seems like it's always wedding season, but we had a big wedding, had several weddings that day, but we had a big wedding, and then we were also catering a wedding, the bakery was. And we get a call that Stoby's is on fire, and it was from one of the servers. And we just thought, okay, well, the vent will put it out. The Ansel system will come on and put it out. We knew it was a kitchen fire. And David, he got up and got dressed quickly. And I just kind of took my time because I thought it's no big deal. The Ansel system will put it out. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had a really long day of preparing all the food for that wedding, and then going to deliver it, setting up the catering, setting up the cake, etc. And then had the rest of my team off delivering other wedding cakes. So, I knew it was going to be a long day, and I needed to put my face on, as my grandmother would say. And so when I got up there, probably about 20 minutes after David did, the fire was pretty much out at that point. And we just thought it was really kind of no big deal. I mean, because from the outside, it didn't look like a big deal. But then David, with the fireman, let David come over and peek in the window, and he turned and looked at me and did this, and his face was just white. I mean, just white. And I thought, oh Lord, this is not a good look on him at all. And so peeked through the window, and you could see it was going to be a total loss. The fire originated on the roof, on a vent, the motor on a vent that's over one of the fryers is what it was. And so it was dropping embers down into the fryer, which caused the fryer to catch on fire. Well, the Ansel system came on, but it kept dropping embers because the Ansel system's designed to go down, put a fire out going down, not going up. And so then the fryer overfilled from all the liquid from the Ansel system, went on the floor, up the walls, and then across the ceiling. That building was so old, and residual grease in there. I mean, we're fortunate there was only one customer in there. Our crew did a fabulous job of making sure she was out, making sure nobody else was in the building. And at that point in time, it wasn't hard. I mean, it was one room, but just making sure there wasn't anybody in one of the walk-ins or the office, got everybody cleared out. The firemen were there in no time. They did an excellent job. But we really didn't have any idea what we were dealing with. That night, when David and I finally got home, it was just, I think we were just kind of shocked. And we sat down and prayed about, we knew how tough this was going to be. And we were so concerned about our employees. And even though we had a very good insurance policy, you still don't know. I mean, we hadn't been through that before, but we prayed that we would not become divided over it. And, you know, for a year and a half of building that back, I don't think we had a single crossword that whole time, which was very helpful because there was a lot of moving parts to getting that rebuilt. But within a week after it was down, Brad Lacey at the chamber called a meeting, and every department in the city, I mean, this is just where I cannot stress enough, be involved with the chamber, be involved, do volunteer activities, get and know people, make the contacts, because it helped. That meeting helped us more than anything. So it was a give and take session. You know, the city planner was there, and I mean, everybody was there. The mayor was there. Everybody was there at that meeting, and we were able to sit down and have a give and take about, okay, they wanted us to get the parking off of Donaghy. I get it. It was a hazard. And they wanted us to not have the drive-through where it was on the old building. I get it. It was so close to coming out from Robinson. But understanding it and then figuring out how you're going to put the building back and still have an efficient drive-through, just one, it was like one thing led to another, but it worked out. I mean, it worked out fine. At first, it was like, do we really want to go through this and rebuild? And then, yes, we did. And I kept a spiral-bound notebook. And I would say anybody that goes through any sort of tragedy, get a spiral-bound notebook, not a regular 3-ring where you can pull a piece of paper out, but so that you can make meticulous notes, and it's in chronological order of everything that happened, because that notebook helped me out when we had problems during reconstruction. We had a wonderful builder. He helped us just so much, and did a lot of hand-holding. But I'm not going to lie, it's other than my son being so ill when he was little, it's the hardest thing I've ever gone through. It was hard. It was just really hard. But we had the community support, and we had a wonderful crew. Our insurance company paid everybody for 60 days. Mike Coates, who owns Mike's Place, had a meeting, let us use their meeting rooms to have our first employee meeting after the fire, because we had all those employees that were so scared of, they didn't know, were they going to get paid? Would they have a job later? I mean, it was terrible. When we got there to Mike's Place, we were just hoping to use the room, and he had hors d'oeuvres set out for us and drinks, and wouldn't let us pay for anything. I mean, it was just so very kind. But so our insurance company paid everybody for 60 days, and then it paid all of our managers and supervisors for a year. And that was 14 people. So everybody else was either able to find a job or come to work we had set up Stoby's Express while we were rebuilding Stoby's. And the funny thing about that, David makes marvelous barbecue. And I've tried for years to get him to open a barbecue restaurant, and he just wouldn't. But where Stoby's Express was, he had the keys in his pocket to that building the morning of the fire. That's how we were able to get open so quickly, because he had finally decided, oh yeah, okay, we'll do this. We'll put in a barbecue restaurant. And I guess, you know, part of that is when you have the fire in the belly to work for yourself and innovate, and I don't know, my words are not coming very clearly at the moment, but when you have that desire to work for yourself and to have fun with it, it's like the creative juices never really turn off. And for me, that's the most fun part of being an entrepreneur, is coming up with an idea, seeing it through to fruition. So at any rate, that's how we were able to get Stoby's Express open so quick. That helped to keep some more people employed. And when we reopened Stoby's, we opened with 26 former employees. So that was not a lot of restaurants can open with 26 employees that are fully trained. And they had, of course, the kitchen's bigger now than the whole old Stoby's was. So there were some logistical problems. We have a wonderful general manager. His name is Matt Young, and he just took that whole crew underneath his wings and was a tremendous help to us. So my responsibility was the inside, the front of the house, as we call it, and David's responsibility was the back of the house. And so we just kind of did our own thing, and it all worked out.
So how long were y'all closed during that? A year and a half from, I know you had the Express, but a year and a half. So I can imagine that a lot of those decisions that you had to make and considerations and conversations with employees are similar to what you're having to do now with the COVID-19 pandemic, and having it on, across all of your locations. So, how did you deal with that? And how are you what are y'all using what of that are you using to pivot, now that the COVID-19 pandemic is happening?
I think the biggest thing is this isn't our first rodeo. And honestly, neither one of us are panicked about this. Yes, it's a terrible thing that has happened. But just like the fire, I truly believe there are so many gifts that we're going to see coming from this. We will not be the same, for sure. We will do business differently. All of us will. And I don't know what it will look like. But honestly, if you really look into your soul, how nice has it been just to have some time to breathe? It's been fabulous. I mean, it's been our crazy busy lives and, we've got to go here and we've got to go there and we've got to do this and we've got to do that. No, we don't. And it's been wonderful to see people out and with their kids and walk in the neighborhoods. And I mean, it feels more like when I was growing up. And I don't want us to lose the lessons that we've learned from this. This won't be over soon. We're all going to have to do some sort of adaptation to keep ourselves relevant and alive. PattiCakes tell this story quickly, but Don Bradley, who was business professor at UCA for years, he wanted to bring his marketing class to do a study when we were opening PattiCakes, and his conclusion was that that PattiCakes would not stay in business for very long because people did not want to eat sweets anymore. Now, this was 10 years ago, it was in 2010. And so because of Don Bradley saying that, we do a lot of savory items at PattiCakes. And one of the things that we do are casseroles, take and bake casseroles. You remember those, Grace? Mm-hmm. And so our take and bake casseroles, I mean, we are selling a gajillion of them. Well, Stoby's Russellville is a much smaller market than Conway. And Stoby's Russellville started doing casseroles to supplement their sales. And it's going so well that will be something that they will continue doing. Would they have ever done that before? No, they wouldn't have. But that's just a small example of what we're going to have to do, what all of us are going to have to do. And I don't know what it will look like for everybody. I don't know what it will look like for us because we really don't know. We really don't know what is coming. But I firmly believe that if we do not value this gift of time we've been given, it's like we've had a reset, like somebody just pushed the reset button on our lives, is how I feel. And if we don't value that gift, then we have missed the lesson entirely.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask a few more questions and then we'll open it up to some of our Facebook Live questions. So if anybody's out there listening that has some questions for Patti, go ahead and drop them in the comments and we'll answer them here in a minute. But one of my last questions is, so let's talk lessons learned. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned since opening, the first the first PattiCakes in Russellville to now?
This is kind of like Sophie's Choice, you know? There's been so many. I think the biggest lesson I've learned through all of this in food business is that there are a lot of people that live with food insecurities. And that is, I never knew that. And it's not like I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth, because I did not. But that is why we support the organizations that we support, because of the amount of food insecurities that there are. And that's why we're willing to donate to these organizations that are doing things to help feed people or give kids at risk a home or help somebody with addictions. That's really where our passion is. And for me, that's the reason behind it. It's sad to live in a country as wealthy as ours and have people that are hungry. It's I have a hard time with that.
Yeah. So, and then what's on the horizon for PattiCakes, for Stoby's, for the whole franchise?
Trying to see if we're still in business next year.
I'm sure it's an interesting question to ask in this class.
Okay, so I was at a convention, a bakery convention at the end of February in Atlanta, and getting away for those conventions are really helpful for me to have some downtime, to get quiet, to be not in the midst of all the employees and the production issues and everything. And I came back with a long list of things that I want to do at PattiCakes Downtown. When we opened PattiCakes Downtown, we were delayed opening because of some construction issues. And so it was sneaking right into the holidays. And PattiCakes Robinson has been seeing such growth every year that we could not open downtown and do everything that I wanted to do, because we had to nurture PattiCakes Robinson first. So the plan was in early January then to come out with our full menu and get moving in that direction. And one thing and another happened, and then here we are with COVID. So for PattiCakes Downtown, we will, when we reopen to the public, we will have all of the menu items on that I've been wanting to do. We'll have all those available. I'm still really struggling with what to do coffee-wise down here. I don't want to go back into doing having a barista and an espresso machine. There's some great coffee shops here. Round Mountain is one of our biggest wholesale customers, and so I don't want to do anything that competes with that. But I've struggled on what to do that's sufficient coffee for people when they come in for our pastry. So that's a struggle. For PattiCakes Robinson, we've always had curbside pickup, but people have not utilized it. And I want to figure out how we can do that. We were supposed to have a drive-through. We ended up having some construction issues and weren't able to put the drive-through in. So that's why we've always done curbside. But like I said, people have not used it that much. I know what it feels like to be a mom with a couple of kids in the car asleep, or even just kids in the car and getting out. And you don't want to. So we're really hoping that this will encourage people to use the curbside more. For Stoby's, David has been working on some things for a while. I don't think they're really ready to announce it yet, but it will be some new food items and more of things that people can take home. Like if they were in for lunch, picking up something for dinner. I think that's probably all I'm about allowed to say at this point. But and then we have, with going back to downtown real quick, we are set up to go into full bread production, but you cannot pay your bills just by selling bread. It just doesn't work. So I don't want to turn into a large wholesale bakery. I don't want that headache, but I'd like to start with us doing the bread for Stobies, where Stobies would be served on homemade bread, their sandwiches and stuff. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I'm so excited for y'all to do bread for Stobies. Your bread is delicious. So I'm pumped for that to roll out. So a few questions from Facebook. What is your favorite, Marcus is asking, what is your favorite aspect of having your own business?
For having my own what?
Your own business.
So I'm a type A personality, and I enjoy the freedom of gathering input and listening to what the team has to say. But I enjoy, ultimately, I know that ultimately the decision's mine, good or bad. And I appreciate that. I enjoy that part of the business very much.
Okay. And then what do you think about having a category? Marie is asking, what do you think about having a category of cakes for people living with diabetes?
Okay, so sugar-free is one thing, but when you're talking about a cake that's sugar-free, it's still very high in carbs. And in Russellville, when we first opened, I enlisted the help of 3 diabetics. One was on metformin, one was on an insulin pump, and one was on insulin shots. And we were doing quite a bit of sugar-free or no sugar added items there. But cake is something that's so high in carbs that diabetics they can't eat very much of it. So that's why we've never really pursued that. We will do sugar-free cupcakes, and we can do well with those. But, you know, if we're at the point in our size, the size that we are, we can't just do one of something or we've lost money. So we have to figure out how we can put it into production. And that's why sugar-free cupcakes work for us. If we had enough people saying we want sugar-free cakes, then we would work on that. I mean, really, truly work on it. But for now, we just do cupcakes. And then we offer a couple of no sugar added desserts. We used to do a no sugar added fudge, and it just didn't sell. So I can't be everything to everybody, and that's one of the hardest things about the bakery business. I'd love to do something for everybody. I'd love to get somebody's grandmother's recipe and make that cake for their special birthday. But at the end of the day, we're a for-profit business. I have to make it work.
Absolutely. And that's, it's interesting that you say that. That's something that we even talk to entrepreneurs when we, do our consults is, not being everything to everybody. And then also, that customer discovery of, you have to sell something at a price point that people will purchase it, but enough of it that it makes sense as a service line for your business. Or so that's interesting. That's great feedback for the entrepreneurs that are listening. Marie has also asked, how specifically has the coronavirus pandemic affected your business outside of kind of what we've already talked about?
So the bakery is actually considered an essential service by the government, and we're allowed to be open. We have chosen to shut our lobbies. We were doing great until we closed our lobbies, and we're still doing much better than most people. We're not as affected as a lot of people, but for me, the decision to close the lobby was because I wasn't comfortable being face-to-face with so many different people all day long, and I couldn't ask my employees to do something I wasn't willing to do. That was one of the things when I first opened PattiCakes that I told myself I would never ask an employee to do something I wasn't willing to do myself. And when we opened PattiCakes Conway for the first 2 months, I cleaned the commode every night because I wanted people to know that I'm willing to do that too. And I'll go do it today if I need to. There's other people that are assigned that task, but I'm still willing to do it. And so it was hard. It was scary to say, we're just going to close the lobby. But it's not been terrible. It has not been terrible. Now, Stoby's Stoby's Conway is doing about the same amount that they were doing before the fire. Obviously, the business really grew when the building, it's twice the size that it was before. We can get food out faster with having a much bigger kitchen. Stoby's Russellville is the one that's hurt the most, but they've started doing casseroles. And so like Monday, they sold, I think, 106 casseroles.
Wow.
So yeah, I know. It's like,
for coming and
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then a question from Miranda: what does a typical day look like for you?
What is a typical day is the question. I don't have a typical day. When we wake up, the first thing we do is drink coffee in bed and visit for a few minutes. And then pre-COVID, it was hit the ground running and get home at dark for me. David works from home primarily. So he's primarily the one that has to deal with our dogs. And like Grace said, we are big into animal rescue, dog rescue. We don't rescue anything else other than that, but that's enough. But we love dogs. So for me, before we opened downtown, I was at the Robinson Bakery all day long. And then somewhere along, I don't know, a few years ago, I have a young lady with me named Kayla who has worked with me in Russellville and then here. She's now our bakery manager and she's our lead decorator. And this business would not be nearly as much fun if Kayla wasn't there with me. I can trust her completely. And so the last couple of years, I've been able to kind of pull back a little bit, and it allowed me to do PattiCakes downtown. I wouldn't have had the time before. But I still do all the ordering for the bakeries. And the reason is, in the food business, you live and die by your inventory. Yes, I could turn it over, but I can keep my thumb on it. And yes, somebody else can step in and do it if I get hit by the proverbial bus, which is something. Grace, how many times have you heard me say that phrase? Like forever.
That's why everything gets written down. Everything in Patti's life is written down as a process for everything.
That's true. Not that we always follow it, but hey, it's a good idea. But anyhow, I try at least once a week to get away and have lunch with girlfriends. That's super important. And then I'm on the board at the chamber, and that takes up few meetings a month, or not a month, but every quarter. It just seems like I have meetings a lot. Active on downtown. I'm not on the downtown partnership board. I'm just in the active in their group. And gosh, I don't know what I do all day. Maybe I waste a lot of time. I don't know, but it seems like I'm always really busy.
It's probably just different every single day. So
every day is different. Yes.
So I think we're gonna wrap it up. And so we always try and end on a high note. So what is one piece of life or business advice that you would leave all of us with?
Oh gosh. Okay. Kindness goes a very long way, and kindness combined with extending grace to other people, because we've all been given more grace than we deserve. It's easy to get upset or to get in your own little world and not take into consideration what somebody else may be going through. And as I've gotten older, I think it's the most important thing that I have learned is just to step back and be kind to people. And it's never, you're never going to be wrong by being kind.
That's fantastic. So Patti, thank you so much for taking the time. I know this is a busy time for you guys, and it sounds like you guys are adapting and overcoming all of what's being thrown at us right now. But I really appreciate you meeting with us. And for those watching, we appreciate you being with us as well. For more content like this, for more events from the Conductor, you can follow us at AR Conductor on Instagram or Facebook. And then on Twitter, it's AR _Conductor. So thank you all and have a great night.
Bye.